Before I jump into the slide deck, I would like to introduce myself. I am Nandita. I work at Airbnb as a senior manager that leads the global engineering team for tax. And our two main pillar, I would say, is really to help Airbnb expand into newer markets and make sure that we are compliant with respect to how taxation works. And we touch almost all the services around guest and host as part of the work that the team does. Outside of Airbnb, I have worked, I think it's been over 2 decades now, in engineering roles. I was a software engineer, then moved into leadership role. I have worked across different domains of solar residential, supply chain, automobiles, and now working in the tax domain. And it is very refreshing to try different domains and see how technology can solve problems across any domain and make lives faster and easier for everybody. As part of my role, I have also focused heavily in the last decade on building teams and leading teams and being very conscious and particular about inclusion in my team. And that's why this topic of building diverse teams was very obvious and very close to me that I want to present on. A lot of the things that you would hear in the slide deck might be very obvious, but the whole intent and goal of this slide is to reinforce some of the points that you already know and actually some tactical things that have worked for me while working in the industry for this long. And if you have any questions during, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll pause and take the questions, or just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, with that, let's go into why do we diverse teams even matter? And why should we put any effort in building diverse teams? So first is diverse perspectives lead to more creativity and innovation. And what you'll see here is it's not an opinion, it's actually something that's backed by data. And so on this slide, I do want to call out that there was a research done by Boston Consulting to indicate that if you do have a diverse management teams, you see 19% higher revenue due to innovation. So, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. I'm going to close that. Moving on to the next point about increased adaptability and problem-solving abilities. Again, with my experience, I've seen if you do build a diverse team, because you get diverse perspectives, your problem-solving abilities increases. And this important fact was also backed by Harvard Business Review team when they did their research. So I'm not going to read through those, but again, to emphasize why diverse teams matter is backed by data. The third point is tied to the prior point was more decision-making through different viewpoints. And this was called out by Deloitte. And if you see all of these data covers kind of all the different viewpoints about why it matters, but I'm trying to just tie some of them with the exact research that was carried out. So if you see the last point, 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile, that just speaks volume just for the business impact diverse teams can make. And last one is increase in profitability. A lot of time when we are showcasing why something matters, I think the bottom line, business profitability, should be called out. And I think it drives a lot of decision making as part of that. So this was backed by McKinsey & Company's report. So this calls about gender diversity and also the ethical and cultural diversity. And if you see, one thing that I really like is it calls out on executive teams that this really matters. And a lot of data that you will see is we do have some sense of diversity in teams, maybe at a beginner level. And as we go higher up, that diversity reduces. So this actually report is very enlightening to see that it does matter to have gender and cultural diversity even at executive teams. Okay, now that hopefully we've anchored on why these teams or diverse teams matter, we can go into what are the barriers that we see. And again, I'm going to tie more to my experience and also some that I've heard. So the first one being unconscious bias, which is, as the name says, unintentional preferences that influence decision making. A lot of times we think we are not being biased in the process of either hiring or retaining people. But again, very well-known data-backed fact is there is some unconscious bias, and we can overcome when we go to the next slide to see how we can be more conscious about these unconscious biases. Next is lack of representation. If we don't have enough diverse perspective and backgrounds, it's difficult for the other people in the meeting on the room to even bring or call out the biases as we were calling about. So it's purely lack of representation is in itself is a barrier. So it's like a chicken and egg problem. We don't have enough people, enough diverse teams, and lack of that is also leading to building less diverse teams. This ties a lot more to the unconscious bias is stereotypes and prejudices, which we make up just because we don't know enough. And a lot of time the assumptions tend to be negative if we don't know something. Lastly is limited access to opportunities. Again, the reason or the barrier for building the diverse teams is because of disparity in resources that the diverse population can have. They don't have access to the opportunity as much as a lot of other people do. So when we do go into what we can do to build diverse teams, that's one thing that we can do. How can we create more opportunities for these diverse teams to even come and participate and have the access to be part of the world where we are hiring for? Okay. Next one, I have to kind of try to divide strategies for building diverse teams. I call it hiring, but I also call it more about organizational level things that we could do as part of hiring. So a few things that we can do is eliminate bias in hiring and promotion. And how can you do that? A few things you can do. Blind resume screening. Maybe remove the name from the resume and just do a blind resume screening. Using diverse interview panels that will make your interview go with less biases and also might make the other person feel more comfortable. Target diverse candidates pools through various channels, and review and update even job description to make sure that it will attract a diverse pool of candidates. You can add in your job description how we are promoting inclusion, what's our diversity goals as an organization, and it will speak to the people who are applying for the job. They will think of inclusion in that aspect. Next one is provide diversity and inclusion training. This applies to more internally in your organization. How can you teach them and put a formal training to talk about unconscious bias, the stereotypes and the prejudices? How can we reduce them through these trainings so we maybe learn more about other cultures? And then as part of the training itself, you can also focus on increasing awareness on cultural differences and promote cultural competency. Next is establishing employee resource groups. This is not necessarily just tied to hiring, but even post-hiring, employers can actually support employee-led ERGs. And I'm calling this out because I do see this happening at Airbnb firsthand, where these ERG groups really create a sense of belonging for the people that are coming from diverse backgrounds. That gives them a safe space where they can talk about issues, where other people can understand those issues, and then that can go to rest of the company who might not be as aware. And ERGs can also help organize a lot of workshops, events, initiatives that could go back or tie back to the training part, what we talked about. Okay. And last one is setting clear goals and measure. And what I mean by that is uh, that you have, if you're talking about hiring, what is your hiring goal? How diverse do you want your hiring pipeline to be? You could put a goal for recruiters about, I want to review resumes from a diverse pool and not just one. So that will force it down on the recruiting function to get you the candidates. Look for those pool. It'll be harder, but it'll be worth it to set very clear goals and measure them. Next is strategies for building diverse teams. Now, this is more focused on retention and growth to say, but again, it can touch different aspects. So the first one is fostering a culture of inclusion. And I would say a lot to lean on all of you here. Like these are things we can do. We don't have to we don't have to wait for an approval in order to creating a culture of inclusion. So the first one on that, I would say lead by example. So we can showcase inclusive behaviors. We can be very authentic. We can be vulnerable to just create a culture of inclusion. Encourage diversity of thought. And this is a very little thing which maybe all of you know is if you are in a meeting, you see diverse perspective and you know somebody's not going to speak up, maybe you can help them. Maybe you can give them a place to provide their perspective. And that ties to providing psychological safety. Like they do feel comfortable that they can share their perspective, whether it is right or wrong, doesn't matter, but they at least feel safe. Next is encouraging collaboration and teamwork. Here you can really, what help with is maybe establish team building activities that encourage diversity and inclusion. Encouraging open and respectful communication. Again, here you can lead by example of showing that openness and respectfulness to your team members, to the rest of your org, or to the rest of your company. And last, again, comes back to measuring success and continuously improving. Again, setting measurable goals is very important and tracking to it and then seeing what I did not do or what could I do to improve this and then go on continuous improvement path. It could be get feedback from the team, listen to employees. You can partner with your talent team if you can't do it. But again, having some goals definitely helps with this. And last one, celebrate diversity, which was also tied to celebrate different cultural events, make yourself more aware of these diversity and celebrate it together. And offer mentorship and sponsorship. Again, as an individual, you can become someone's mentor. And again, I'll tie it to my work at Airbnb. This is a big thing that I see where mentorship and sponsorship, like you can actually go and talk about a person, either coming from diverse background or otherwise, but that really helps that you are a champion for them and you could offer, and you can even talk to your companies to offer this if they are not. With all those strategies that I just talked about, I also want to go back and reinforce how important it is to build a diverse team. And again, this is not going to be more data backed, but these are certain quotes that a lot of successful leaders have shared on different forums. And I just want to maybe take 30 seconds for you to absorb these quotes and see why diverse teams matter or why we should build them. And I do see a few chat messages that came in. I'll look at it after these quotes and see if there's any question. You're right, Karishma. Yes, anonymized resumes is a huge thing. And one thing I would also add to anonymized resume screens is going back to measurable goals. is be very mindful of your pipeline. Like you can actually force your pipeline to be very diverse, even with respect to resume screening. Uh, Again, I have seen that made a huge difference where you are setting goals even for your recruiters to say, I need to say 50-50% balance of your URM candidates in the pipeline. Because a lot of time again, I have heard this a few times during my career is, oh, it's very difficult to find these candidates. It's a challenge, but I think we have to embrace that challenge and figure out different means, or maybe partner with a lot of groups that are helping provide opportunity to these groups, and that really helps. Yeah, and understanding culture, absolutely. And this is where I feel just being a sponsor for one individual or a group of individual and your ERG groups really help, because I feel it gives the diverse population a place to feel very comfortable to share what they want to. Oh, Anne, thanks so much for the Connect Apprenticeship call out. Yes. Uh, for rest of the people on the call, that actually is a program where we do get people from non-software background into the company. We coach them, take them through training, and some of them come and become part of our team. In fact, I have one member who joined us this month as now a full-time employee, and she came through the Connect program. And again, I can't thank Airbnb enough for putting such a program in place. And it's an example of some of the things that we talked about here as strategies that are used in that program, where there are so many check-ins. There is a dedicated mentor for the Connect program that I think has made it very comfortable for people to feel inclusive, even if they don't have the same software engineering chops, but they're building it, they're new to it. And I think it's a live example of how we can build a culture to get anyone on board as diverse perspective. Okay, so Deshna, about ERGs. Yes, so let me just call out maybe some of the ERGs. So we have different ERGs. So the very standard ones, I would say, like you have a woman ERG, but I would call the otherwise. Say we have an Arabs ERG, we have a wisdom ERG, we have something called as geeky, and I forget the nerds. We have a nerds ERG. So those ERGs are really focused on maybe certain aspect, either a culture or technical. When I say technical, it's more nerd, right? If you are more into engineering and you want to. So people join that group. They do celebrate culture as one. They offer sessions where they will invite leaders to come and talk to them on various topics. So again, the whole intent of that ERG is to build a community so that community feels safe talking about their topics, and even sometimes taking their topics to leadership. There have been certain suggestions about sponsorship and all that came out from these ERG groups. They felt, oh, if we had a sponsorship program, it would be better and more inclusive for us. And some of them have led to certain programs in Airbnb. So that's the perspective I would say ERG. It's just around having a more of a safe space plus like-minded people in your group. And then they take that back to rest of the company.